Welcome to Crossroads. My name is Dave Hammer, and this is a show where three friends who happen to be pastors get together to talk about different issues, sometimes directly related to the Bible, and other times more current event focused. I'm here with my friend Michael John, who's the pastor of Market Street Baptist in Amesbury, Massachusetts, and Rick Harrington, who is the pastor of First Baptist Church of Haverhill in Massachusetts as well. And I actually pastor a church called Danville Baptist Church in Danville, New Hampshire. We're continuing a series where we're talking about what we've been calling the secular creed. And it's the thing you see on yard signs usually. Sometimes you'll see a poster of it in a business that has, it's usually often rainbow colored, and it'll have statements like love is love, and Black Lives Matter. And so we've been going through that list, that creed, and just talking about each one. And so today what we're going to talk about is the statement, women's rights are human rights. I did a little research on this, and I according to one source that I read, it said that the most prominent usage of this statement is from a speech given by Hillary Clinton when she was First Lady. She was in Beijing, China in 1995, where the United Nations was having a world conference on women, and she said, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. Now, today, like when we see that on those yard signs, it's referring, I think, primarily to the right to abortion. But when Hillary Clinton said that, she went on to define what she was talking about, and you'll hear as I read her quote, she didn't define it that way. Here's what Hillary Clinton said originally. She said, "As long as discrimination and inequities remain so commonplace everywhere in the world, as long as girls and women are valued less, fed last, overworked, underpaid, not schooled, subjected to violence inside and outside their homes, the potential of the human family to create a peaceful, prosperous world will not be realized." So it seems to me, as I read that paragraph, that when she said women's rights are human rights, what she meant was that women should be treated equally with men and with all human beings. And so, first of all, before we get into, we're going to talk mostly about the abortion issue today, but I want to begin by asking you guys, what do you think about that original meaning? What do you think about the fact that women deserve equal rights with men, generally speaking? And I'll start with Rick and see what you think, Rick.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dave. So just even the idea of human rights assumes, of course, that humans are different than the rest of creation, and that there are certain inherent rights that come to us. And I think that assumes that the image of God, that we are not like the animals. There is something different about humans. And the Bible describes humans as made in the image of God, male and female, made in the image of God. And I think Christianity has always taught, on its fundamental level, scriptural level, that men and women are equal. We're not the same, we're different, but we are equal. We're equal in the eyes of God, we're equal of value and worth, and therefore we all have inherent rights as those created by God as His special image-bearing creature.
Yeah, I don't think Hillary goes far enough. I think she's content to have women equal with men. And I think that's a great disservice to women. As I've looked at the scriptures, and as I just from experience and just from my own instinct as a man, that women, it says in the scriptures, the woman is the glory of the man. And there's something that is privileged and beautiful about the woman. She is a treasure to be cherished. And I think we intuitively understand this in the way that we in a civilized society think about women, and we know it's appropriate, so that this is why we men go to war and fight for our women, to protect them. And 1,000 men can die in battle, and we're sad about that. But if a woman is taken captive, that's a disaster. Or as the Titanic is going down, it's women and children first on the boats, and any man that would dare take a woman's spot would be rightfully scorned and despised. women are cherished and to be treasured because they have the incredible privilege of bringing life into the world through their own bodies and creating homes for this next generation of life. And the scriptures tell us that the salvation must come through the woman.
Yeah.
And so our salvation is banking on this. So it's important that we not treat women equally as men, but that we really treat them, treasure them even above ourselves. And I think we as fathers and husbands, we have that instinct in us. We would do anything for our wives.
Yeah.
Take extra jobs, work extra shifts, whatever we need to do to make sure that they're provided for. And if we didn't, we should be scorned by our society.
Yeah.
So I don't think she goes far enough. I think women are better than that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, guys. I have a quote here from historian Tom Holland. So he's not a Christian. He actually focuses historically on the classical period of Rome and Greece. And he was surprised after spending many years focusing on that period how foreign and different their values were than his and than ours today. And he wrote this. He said that every human being possessed an equal dignity was not remotely an evident truth in the ancient Greco-Roman world. A Roman would have laughed at it. The origins of this principle lay not in the French Revolution, nor in the Declaration of Independence, nor in the Enlightenment, but in the Bible. Both of you just alluded to this, but I wonder if you might say any more, Michael, about human dignity of all people and of women, the way that women should be treated from the Bible. Do you have anything else to add than what we've said?
Yeah, I would just, if you go to Ephesians 5, as you reflect more upon it, about how is a man to treat the woman in his life, but to love her as Christ loved the church, which means that he is to lay down his life for her, cherishing her, caring for her, providing for her. Yeah, I think that's consistent, and it's a very Christian thing, and it's a lot of the other things. In some places women are treated like slaves and chattel, and that's disgraceful. It's disgusting and abhorrent. And in other societies, they're treated just like men. They're just one of the guys, and that's degrading for them too. So I think what I fear in like things like the French Revolution and some of these other places is this war on femininity and wanting there to be a genderless society where there's just persons.
Yeah.
And there's something beautiful about the feminine and about the woman that we have to recapture. I don't know if you want to say any more about that.
Just, again, from thinking of Tom Holland's quote there, from a historical perspective, history is just full of violence, and it's just full of barbaric activity, and women have had it bad over history. And it's almost comical when people look at the scripture and say that it's in any way oppressive or degrading to women because of its extreme countercultural nature. I mean, just taking the New Testament, we could certainly look at ancient Israel and say this too. But women are playing a very important part of Jesus' ministry. Yeah. They are said to be his supporters, financial supporters. Yeah. They become disciples of Jesus along with the men. They're the first witnesses to the resurrection. And according to the Judaism of that day, a woman's testimony in a court of law would not even be acceptable. It's not even considered worth anything. And yet in the Christian faith, they are the first witnesses, the eyewitnesses to the resurrection. And they immediately become very prominent in serving in the church. And even now, the Christianity across the world there's more women than there are men Christians. Yeah. So it's almost comical to see Christianity as sort of in any way negative or oppressive to women, when in reality it's literally like sawing the branch that you're sitting on, because Christianity has provided the framework for equality, men and women. Not equal in terms of roles, kind of what you were saying, Michael, but equal in terms of value and worth in the sight of God. So it's a great quote by Tom Holland when you consider how barbaric the Romans, even though we look at the Roman Empire as very, great political sort of structure, barbaric in terms of its treatment of slaves and women. And many, many cultures are like that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we're saying is, like the other statements on this secular creed, when taken at face value without the kind of political baggage that comes with it, we like this statement, just like I think we like love is love, Black Lives Matter, women's rights are human rights. I mean, at face value, yes, we're all for these things. But But that's not all that this means. So this is a recent United Nations Human Rights Commission statement says this about women's rights. It says this, that restrictive abortion laws are a form of discrimination against women. So they pull that into the human rights arena. And then they say this: criminalization of abortion, denial or delay of safe abortion, and forced continuation of pregnancy are forms of gender-based violence that, depending on the circumstances, may amount to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Okay, so this is what this statement has in mind, that women's rights are human rights, that abortion, that legal abortion is part of human rights, that not having it according to the United Nations, not allowing it is torture. Yeah. So we're not going to respond to that. We'll interact with some pro choice arguments in a little bit. But I just want to start out by asking you each, maybe I'll start with Michael, what do you think about abortion? What's your personal conviction on abortion, and why do you think that?
So I look back at my history and I'd say it was, I never thought about abortion. As a man, it's like, it's not something in my I'm going to deal with, I think about. Not until I was probably a freshman in college when I first was confronted with the issue. And it was a particular magazine, and all it did was just open my eyes to the reality that there's a person there, that there's a baby. I never thought about it. Who thinks about abortion when you're growing up? It's something that comes at you now, and I wasn't sexually active, so I wasn't thinking about these things. But then it was kind of calling our attention. This is during the days of Operation Rescue, and then in the 80s, and it was just shocking and appalling to me. And it was, I remember I was seeing the pictures of what was being done to these little ones. And no one could hear them scream, no one could hear their voices, and they were just being slaughtered. It was horrifying to see that, and how many hundreds of thousands, how many millions, over 60 million now since Roe v. Wade. And it was an easy case to make as a Christian to like convict me, because one of our core beliefs is obviously, do not kill, and especially particularly an innocent life. And hands that shed innocent blood is an abomination. And so this is clearly an innocent life, and this is blood being shed here. So what do we do with that? And at that point, I was wrestling with that, of how involved to get and how to speak out against. And I remember bringing it up to our leaders for our youth group, and I was shocked at the pushback I was getting from the tension that I thought it was so a slam dunk. I thought it was so obvious that this is horrible, you don't do this. And yet when I bring it out, it was like half of our leaders of our Christian youth group were fighting back on this, saying, no, this is really important, and you need to understand the woman's perspective, and so forth, and all that, and the trauma of this, and what this is going to do. It's going to ruin a woman's life if she can't do this. And fine, you make great arguments, except for one thing: it's a baby. What possible inconvenience, struggle could justify this? I think that's what we have to wrestle with. It's like, so with me, it's like, I completely understand why a woman would want to get an abortion and would be pressured to get one given different circumstances. I get it. It's hard, it's painful, it's suffering, it's stuff, but then you have all that on the other side, and you have just one bit of information on this side, which is, but that's an innocent child.
Yeah.
And you're dismembering an innocent child. I'm sorry, it doesn't wait. So that's where I'm at it. So I'll leave it to if Rick wants to.
Yeah, well, I agree, but I would just add, it's always, as a pastor, just as a Christian, there's the moral and there's the ethical question about abortion, and then there's the legal. And I definitely feel more confident talking about the moral question, but I do think that definitely has legal implications. Yeah. We wouldn't say that everything immoral should be illegal. There are certain things that are moral questions. I think most of us would say, using the Lord's name in vain is immoral, but we don't think it should be illegal, right? I would agree. Sure. But if what abortion ultimately is taking of a life, which is murder, and most societies would agree murder should be something illegal, then it does have legal ramifications. But just the idea that even the word abortion, again, has that sort of slippery language. I mean, it's to abort is to stop a process, right? To abort a process. But what is happening? You have a human life that has begun, and that's been sort of the question, when does human life begin? Biblically speaking, it seems to be pretty clear upon conception. Yeah. Jesus was born of a virgin. He was fully man and fully God in the womb. That didn't start after birth. Yeah. The Psalms talk about being knit together in my mother's womb. And so if there's a life, a human life growing in a womb, the question of abortion, really, if we just talk about what it really is should we kill it? Should we end that life? Or not really should we, but is it moral? Is it ethical to do that? And is there any reasons, and we may talk about that there may be some, the life of the mother and so forth, but to kill this living human being, that's a pretty drastic action. And I think that we can say, for the most part, it is an immoral thing to do, to kill a living human being in the womb. It's almost irrelevant whether this living human being is inside or outside the womb, right? The real question is killing this child, or if you want to call fetus, whatever, again, we're using different words to describe different things. It's a human life growing. Is it moral? I think it's immoral. And if it's immoral and murderous, then shouldn't there be legal ramifications for that? So I think, again, language can kind of cloak with the reality of what's happening. When everyone has to agree, it's a life, a human life, it's not a different type of life. Is it moral to end that life, and under what circumstances? So
I mean, I think the basic argument is it's wrong. It's always wrong to kill an innocent person. Abortion kills an innocent person, therefore abortion is wrong. One argument that I've appreciated from a philosopher named Peter Kreeft, who's down at Boston College, and he addresses those who are uncertain that the life in the womb is a human life. Maybe it's not. And he said, so if you have doubts, about that, just imagine with me a hunter that sees a deer in the underbrush out in the woods, and so he raises his rifle, but as he's looking through his sights, something about the way it moved made him wonder, maybe it wasn't a deer, maybe it's another hunter. He's just not sure. He's pretty sure it's a deer, but something's giving him pause. Now, I think we'd probably agree he should not pull the trigger if he thinks maybe it's another hunter, like 10% chance. He just shouldn't pull the trigger. Or a similar argument that he makes is, imagine you're driving at dusk, the sun is just starting to go down, and a driver sees a garbage bag sort of being tossed by the wind over the road in front of them, and they're pretty sure at first they're just thinking, oh, it's just an empty garbage bag, but then at some point the way it moves, or maybe by the wind, made them think, wait, is that like maybe a homeless person in there, or someone on drugs? They're just not sure, and 90% sure again that it's just a bag. But if they think maybe there's a person in there, they're probably going to swerve, And so if we think maybe, you're not totally convinced, you think maybe that's a human life in there. I think it should give us pause. But let me go through some common arguments you're going to get, that we're going to get in response to our pro-life convictions, and here, see how you might respond. So I'll start with Rick. So what if someone said, you pro-choice people are always trying to force your religion on us? I mean, isn't this, there's no separation of church and state in this country. You're trying to force me to follow the Bible. What might you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great, that is a common objection, for sure. I think we're naive if we think there are no ethical or moral sort of underpinnings of the law. In fact, when we think of civil rights is a question of moral and ethical behavior. When we think of why is murder wrong to begin with, right? Why is it wrong for the strong to kill the weak, let's say? Or, hey, I'm hungry and he's got food, I want it, I can. So there are certainly moral implications for that. But again, I think that they're right in one sense, in that I don't expect every non-Christian citizen to act like a Christian. I don't expect them to attend church. I don't expect them to, again, you don't use the Lord's name in vain. I think adultery is a sin, but I don't think it should be illegal necessarily, right? Those are, but murder is a fundamental right of human beings. So in a society, that's the one thing I think most people would agree. You cannot kill your fellow citizen. If you can't have a functional society. So now the question is this living human being then protected by the law, and should they be? I don't think you have to be a Christian to agree on that question. I think we should have an open discussion about that. And in a representative democracy, we should be all, including Christians, have a right to voice our opinion and to make decisions as to what we think is best for the society we live in. So,
Good. Mike, do you have any comments
well
on that?
Said. Same thing. I think you can defend the right to life of a preborn child as a Christian, and you can defend it as an American. You can go either way. There are other issues, like when we get into like homosexual marriage or things like that. That's a little more hazy. But with abortion, I think it's pretty cut and dry. It's one area that is a problem for Christians, and it's a problem for Americans. So
I was reading through a list of quotes from different embryology textbooks, and they were all saying how human life begins at conception. And one thing I noticed, and so that's not a biblical or a religious argument, that's just a scientific argument. But one thing I noticed about this long list, and it had a bibliography of where these quotes came from, was that all of these quotes were from embryology textbooks written in 1980 or earlier. And so I'm just wondering, maybe the person who compiled this list made it back in 1980, but I wonder if this issue becoming politicized has forcing textbooks on embryology not to say that anymore. I mean, making, people that are sympathetic to the pro-choice, they don't want to say it's a human life anymore. So I don't know, but I'd say the pro-life arguments are more scientific and philosophical than they are religious. And now that philosophical part, you're going to have to make metaphysical judgments. Do human beings deserve any rights? Okay, well, you can't prove that in a laboratory. So both sides are bringing metaphysical assumptions and opinions into this. Okay, let me start with you, Michael, on another objection. Okay. So this is really common one. If women cannot have safe and legal abortions, then they're going to have illegal and unsafe abortions. That's why abortion should be legal.
Okay. I don't. The reasoning of that is faulty. I mean, it's something is right or wrong. If it's wrong, you stop it. You don't try to legalize it and make it safer. But then again, it's like they say safe. A safe abortion.
Safe for the mother.
Yeah, but not for the child, is it? If you can come up with an abortion that's safe for the baby, I'm all for it. I mean, if you can find a way to remove that child safely, I'm on your side. But so long as someone's getting killed, I wouldn't call it safe, whether it's legal or illegal. So it's a distracting issue, and it also shows that they would argue in this way, shows they really have no case. When they argue around it in this way, give these, what about this, or what if this would happen, and all these atrocities. So, look, I can say, if I'm a murderer and I'm coming in and, and I kill you with a silencer, see, that's okay, because then at least don't wake up the kids. That's better than if I killed you with a full blast, because that would make everyone go crazy and it would really be a mess. I'm like, it's an evil thing either way, and to fine-tune it that way, legal or illegal, distracts from the issue, and the issue still comes down to, is it safe when a child is killed? I don't think so.
Good. Do you have any thoughts on that one? If women can't have safe and legal abortions, they're going to have illegal and unsafe abortions.
I mean, not a whole lot to add, except that laws should be based not on ends justify the means kind of a situation. I would say, I don't know if you're going to talk about this later, Dave, I do think that particularly as pastors in this local church, we want to support pregnant moms, new dads, new babies, and so like our local pregnancy care center is very active in helping moms who are in those difficult situations and feeling like I can't have a baby, I'm not in a place to do this. Here's some counseling, here's some care, here's some financial support, here's the relational support. So definitely we don't want to have anyone feel so trapped that I feel like I have no other choice than to go through some extremely dangerous abortion procedure that, we don't want that, but you don't make a law based on ends justify the means. You make a law based on what is good for the people that are being governed and what they corporately with a representative government decide, at least in our country. So speaking of its legality, but I think, I would love to see the hearts of the people that I'm ministering to change so that they want to have the baby and they, trusting the Lord and yet also getting the support and the care they need. That's a huge deal. Okay. I mean, to be honest, I have a very little say in the legal question. I have a lot more input on the ministry side of things and the counseling and the care side of things.
That's
great. Can I jump out of order with you a little bit here? Because you have objective 5, which really grates me, that pro-life people care more about children before birth than after birth. In fact, my wife has a friend that she's arguing, and her friend is making that case with her. She's pro-choice, and she's all for abortion, and she says, you just care about unborn babies, you don't care about unwanted children, all these things. And that is one of the greatest slanders of the church that I've ever seen. This notion that we don't care about children after they're born, we only care about them in the womb. And let me ask you this question, guys. If a woman who is pregnant came into your church and stood in front of everybody and said, I'm pregnant, and I'm not going to raise this baby. I'm going to abort this baby, but if there's someone here that would take this child in, I'll give birth to him and give him to you. How many people in your congregations would raise their hands?
Yeah.
Without even thinking. How many of them would do that?
Yeah.
Right? I know for us, it would be if any less than 80% raised their hand, I would be horrified if it was that low.
Yeah.
I think without even thinking, of course, absolutely, we would do whatever we could to take that. But they've complicated, they keep driving this home, like, oh, you don't care about children. It's like, no, precisely we do. We do care about children. We care about them so much. We care about them before they're even born, we care about them. Yeah. And I just am so sickened that the church is constantly slandered this way, and so many Christians are just lumped in with these radical anti-abortionists who are bombing clinics, who are just insane people. When and I know that almost every Christian if they had the means, even if they didn't have the means, would take in a baby rather than see it perish, without question.
The highest percentage of adoption category of people are evangelical Christians that actually adopt. And you see, most crisis pregnancy centers are Christian-based, right? It's ironic. I know there's a lot. Things are changing so quickly, but at the time of this taping, you have some attacks on crisis pregnancy centers. And it's almost funny you'd have an objection like that, saying you don't take care of the baby afterwards, and you would also seek to terrorize a crisis pregnancy center that tries to take care of babies afterwards, right? So what's the point? But I would say that I can't speak for all Christians everywhere, but from my own experience, Christians are very eager to help love and serve and care for the whole process of pregnancy and care for the baby and the family afterwards.
Absolutely.
I've seen extremely generous, self-sacrificial, committed to caring in that way. So.
Let me clarify this objection and then try to make it as strong as possible and respond to it myself. So the objection is, hey, look, when we pro-choice people look at the political agenda of you pro-life people and the way that you vote on various issues, we see that you say you're very concerned about life in the womb, but when it comes to these other issues related to caring for people at different ages, you're against all the things that that maybe the progressives want to do to care for people. And that's debatable, as you were just saying. But let's say that's absolutely true. That still doesn't mean that pro-life people are wrong. The fact that we're trying to defend innocent life in one case, and maybe we're wrong, maybe we're blind in all these other areas, but if this really is a life, even if we're deluded and blind in all these other areas, it doesn't change that you still should not kill it, So you know,
And that argument that they make, because by your voting, see, you don't care about, you know, welfare and these things for people that are hurting, and you only care about this issue, shows the mind of the progressive, which is all about the power of the state. Everything must be done through the state. As if it's not possible to care for a child without the government involved.
yeah,
Because as believers, we're like, why do we need the government to do these things? We can do these things. In fact, our churches are doing these things, and we want, just leave us alone, in one sense. You know, we can care and do a much better job. But their idea of caring for the poor and the least is taxation and government programs.
Yeah.
That's their idea. It's a racket.
yeah.
And that's why there's such an insincerity in it. It just irritates me, but we'll continue.
Yeah, and I, you know, I would just add one thing real quick, and that is, the truth of the matter is that, I mean, as all three of us are pastors, 99 and then some % of our time is spent on caring for people, not dealing with abortion and the legality of abortion. It's, you know, we have a soup kitchen every Sunday at 2 o'clock. We're visiting nursing homes and those in hospice care, and like the vast majority of what we do is just caring for people. It's not actually dealing with Roe v. Wade or something like that, right? So it's just it's a strange argument, but I agree with what you're saying, Dave. In some ways, it's a red herring because it's irrelevant to the real question of, is this issue right or wrong?
Yeah.
But regardless, is this issue right or wrong?
Yeah, true. Good. Let me. I might have got mixed up on the order of the. Well, we went out of order with the way I listed the objections. So I hope if I'm getting off track here, if
You're
I'm
on number
repeating
3.
myself, tell me that's what I thought. Okay. So I'll start with you, Michael. This one is, and this is where the pro-choice movement gets its name.
Yeah.
The objection is, but women have the right to control their own bodies. The government, you pastors, no one else has the right to control the bodies of individual women. Only women can do that. What might you say to that?
Fine. Sure. Except it's not your body. It's another body. That's the point we're making. That's a separate body with separate DNA, with separate limbs, separate heart, everything. It's its own entity. If that's not that, this is a completely different discussion. And fine, you women figure it out. If you want to do things with your bodies, you know, there's so many things that, you know, the whole thing of controlling your own bodies, what even that means. There's certainly moral things that you know, is prostitution something that we should legalize, is these kind of things. Forget that for a second. We'll concede the point. You know, you have the right to do what you wish with your own body. That's not your body. It's dwelling within your body, but it's not your body. Which I would argue gives you even a greater responsibility for this little one, since he is seeking safe haven within you.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone came into your home seeking refuge, an innocent party, not a criminal on the run, an innocent person came into your home, and you were just so inconvenienced by this, you determined to murder this person and say, I have a right to do in my home whatever I wish. I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It makes you more of a monster in that regard. I would say, again, it comes down to, is this a baby or not?
Yeah.
To push your illustration even further, Michael, the innocent person didn't just walk over to your house. You invited them. So it's not as if the baby appears out of nowhere. There's decision making that goes into this, right? So there is a decision to, with sex comes procreation, right? Decisions are made. Now, that's where a whole discussion happens when it comes to rape and incest and that type of thing. But assuming the vast majority of abortions are not that, there is activity that leads to this new life that now grows in a woman's womb. Now the question is, okay, you're right, it is your body, and your body is now sort of maintaining and protecting this new child, male or female, that's in your body. Now, is it right for us to have clinics that are there for you to kill it? That's the moral question, right? So yeah, your body doesn't cease to be your body. There is now another body that's being protected by your body. Is it ethical and moral to kill that child? And if there are certain circumstances, okay, let's talk about what they are. But I mean, to have a whole industry of abortion, a whole sort of clinic and a whole sort of movement to say, yes, this is an expendable form of life now based on the fact that it's growing in your body. It's missed the point that this is still another body. Yeah. Now what can be done? What needs to be done for you? So
as you brought out, Rick, this objection assumes basically the premises and the goal of the sexual revolution, which is sex should be, we should be able to have sex wherever, whenever we want, without consequences. And that part is just assumed, but then what happens with after that? They're wanting to not have consequences. Basically, women have the right to control their own bodies. They should have the right, basically, to have sex wherever and with whoever. And what we're arguing is, we're saying no, but you can't do the next thing, which is if a child is conceived, you put it to death. We're saying that's not okay.
Yeah, and I was listening to Jordan Peterson's he's becoming more and more popular, and he has an interesting framework of things where he says he's rather than talking about rights and as the way to happiness and to meaning in life, it's about responsibilities, and he really harps on responsibilities, and so given our decisions, given our situations, whether we are rightfully in them or wrongfully, whether we deserve to be in them or not, we find ourselves with crosses to bear and challenges to face, and what are our responsibilities in that moment? So when you find yourself pregnant, what is your responsibility as a woman? What is your responsibility as a man?
Yeah,
who got that woman?
Absolutely.
Don't forget that guy.
That's huge.
This child didn't just come from the woman.
No.
The man's a part of this.
Yeah.
And so what is his responsibility in this? And that's the men. And this is what's frustrating to me, is because I think that men are probably more pro-choice than women are, because it just frees them of their responsibilities.
That's true.
And it's just an easy out. Just get an abortion. We can move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I related to the, well, in that United Nations statement, I just am amazed whenever I see this phrase, forced pregnancy. They're saying forced pregnancy is torture. And okay, well, it's it's so funny. It just assumes women are going to become pregnant.
Forced continuation of pregnancy.
Out of the blue, like it's just like you catch a cold or something. But we know where pregnancy comes from.
So I'm wondering, did the UN Human Rights Commission consult with China on this, who were forcing abortions on women?
I don't know.
And that's not torture? That's not a problem?
Yeah. That's a great point. That's a greater
This is why these people are so perverse. These are our leaders. This is the darkness of our world, that they come out with this kind of statement to talk about pregnancy as something violent and torturous upon a woman. The very beautiful thing that she brings into the world is treated with such disgust and contempt, and then overlooking the horrors of what's really happening, where the Chinese government is forcing their women for the longest time. I think it's now they can have 2 kids now. I think, I'm not sure what it is, but having to forced abortions on their women, and the horrors that is, just overlooking it. And I have a feeling that China's probably on this Human Rights Commission as they wrote this too.
Yeah.
I mean, along with that, I have a lot of compassion on the woman who is in that situation and feeling sort of the weight of the world on her. I have no compassion on the abortion industry, which I think preys upon that. It's a very wealthy, money-making industry, and wants to sort of profligate that mentality of this is just like any other form of contraception. This is about sexual freedom to just go ahead and kill life, the life growing in you. I think that you have young girls, 16, 17, 18, who are just getting this bombarded to them and saying, hey, this is my freedom, this is my feminism, as opposed to mature, responsible adults trying to say, hey, sex leads to this. This is a responsibility now. You have a human life growing in you. What can we do to support and help? But also just being aware of what one thing leads to another, So I'd have a lot more compassion, Dave, on a young, and this has happened in ministry, I'm sure probably happened similar to you guys, who walks in my office and says, I'm pregnant, I don't know what to do. I'm going to have loads of compassion there. I'm definitely not going to counsel her towards abortion. But my anger and vitriol, like you, Michael, comes against our leaders who are just pushing this industry upon them. So
I want to jump off of that too. Just the industry of abortion, the millions of dollars. Follow the money, right? The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and the kind of money that hundreds of millions that Planned Parenthood takes in, and then uses to bribe even and to pressure our politicians to do these atrocities. The selling of body parts after these aborted babies are aborted, these horrors that they do, it's all about the money. They do not care about women. That's what drives me crazy with this, is that they present themselves as really caring about women. We really care about women's rights. They do not care about women. They're destroying their lives, and they're making quick money off of it. It's disgusting. And I think, I tell you what, if you can go and watch Abby Johnson, when she spoke at the Pregnancy Care Center's banquet, she was absolutely brilliant, and she has her movie, it was Unplanned. And she being a former Planned Parenthood director, gives an inside scoop of what they were about and how they did things and how they were targeting girls to get them to have more abortions, because that's more money for them. It's easy money. It doesn't take long, and they get several $100s for each one. And then we have our government funding it too.
Any thoughts on this objection? Abortion is health care. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, again, the slipperiness of language again used here. Health care is literally caring for the health of one. So obviously, the health of the human life growing in your womb, in a woman's womb, is not being cared for. It's being literally killed, so aborted.
Yeah.
How is it helping the health of the mother to kill this child? How is that a health care issue?
Yeah.
Again, we could talk about things like ectopic pregnancies where the baby's growing on the outside of the uterus. There's no chance of survival, and there has to be proactive measures taken. Yeah. If the mother has uterine cancer and treatment needs, those are very difficult issues, but you don't make rules or laws based on exceptions. You deal with exceptions as they come and as they need to be dealt with. So to call it healthcare, in what sense? In what sense is it healthcare? It's in one sense, at least from the perspective of the child, it's the exact opposite of healthcare. It's health destruction, literally. But just the slipperiness of language to make it seem more palatable for us to call it healthcare.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Michael? Abortion is healthcare.
Well, just because a doctor does it, that's what makes it healthcare.
Wow.
I suppose that what Hitler's doctors did, the torturous experiments that they did in Germany, I guess that would be healthcare too. So.
Okay, one last one I'll mention is men shouldn't tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. Who are we as men to tell women what they can or can't do? It was very related to another one we talked about. But any thoughts on that? Are we not allowed? Should we not be allowed to have an opinion on this since we're men?
I mean, I think we should have an opinion, but I do think we do live in a representative democracy, and so women vote, and there are more pro-life women than there are pro-life men. People may think assume this is just really a men sort of, because that's the way it's presented.
And it was men who gave us Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, it was 9 men that gave us Roe v. Wade, and now. Again, I don't know where this will end up, but some of the questions about Roe v. Wade, there's at least one woman, and by the way, I think it was 9 white men.
Yeah,
right? There you go. And now you have a black man, you have a white woman, you have a mix of people who are pushing in the other direction. So, really, the question again, you don't determine morality by popular opinion or by skin color or by gender, right? It's determined by what is right and wrong. So. Men should certainly have a voice in it, but I think it is wise to listen to what women, and what we hear from a lot of women is the same thing, that this is an issue of life.
Yeah.
So.
And the whole thing, what about the man who's involved in the pregnancy? Does the father have a right in any of this as well? And Dave Chappelle is a comedian. He makes pretty stinging joke about this, where he says, if you have the right to kill this baby, then I have the right to abandon him. And it's a shocking joke, but it shows how horrifying, and yet he's right. There's a logic in what he's saying here. And so but yet you're horrified by it, as you should be.
Mm-hmm. Good, that's good.
So again, it's not her body we're talking about. It's a third person here that has no one to speak for him.
Yeah. In the news this week, major news, this leaked Supreme Court draft that the majority is contemplating this is a draft of their decision to roll back Roe versus Wade and and so if that goes forward, if Roe versus Wade is repealed, which means they send the decision about what should be done, how abortion should be handled by law to the states, and we're seeing a big uproar right now. I don't know. What do you think is ahead for the pro-life movement if that happens? Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think in Massachusetts, it's going to be. I think pregnancy care centers are going to have their work cut out for them. I think you're going to have a lot of people going, because Massachusetts is not going to overturn, is not going to restrict abortion in any way.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have people coming from other states coming up this way as well.
Yeah.
So I think it kicks into gear. I think it's the overturning of Roe v. Wade does nothing to end abortion. It just leaves it to states.
Yeah.
That's a necessary first step. And then each state has to figure this out, and it'll be very interesting to see where it goes. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people will begin thinking about abortion. What Roe v. Wade did was it took the topic away from the public.
Yeah.
It said, look, it's settled. There's nothing to talk about. It's a constitutional right. Just stop arguing about it and be done with it. Yeah. And it just kind of silenced everything. And now it's like, now we can debate it again. Now we can vote on it. Now we can talk about it. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing. You need to bring it to light and see and let the people decide and see where it goes. And we'll see how monstrous we are as a nation. Now we'll really see, how cruel and heartless we are as a people. We'll see.
Abortions have been in decline for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good sign that things are moving in that direction, and that there's a lot more, that there are movements that we're seeing of people wanting to put higher restrictions on abortion. Yeah. And when you look at where most Americans are, they're usually somewhere in between. They believe that there should be some abortions allowed, but there should be exceptions, and there should be, most Americans are not on the far end of any, abortion on demand at any point in time. To be fair, most Americans aren't also, probably where a lot of evangelical Christians are in restricting it, but they're not 100% there. So all overturning Roe v. Wade does is it leaves it to the people to decide now.
Yeah.
It no longer sees it as a constitutional right,
yeah.
Which again, this is not my wheelhouse, my expertise, but I think it was wrongly to decide it as a constitutional right to begin with. It was based on the 14th Amendment, the right to privacy, which is never, it should never have been constitutionally protected. It should have been allowed for the states. And all that means is if you live in Mississippi or Texas and you wanted to get an abortion, you would go to a state that would allow it. That's all that this would do. Very encouraging, though, that I think science has begun to show that where human life begins, and that the mentality actually for the last 25 years is actually moving away from abortion. It's not, we're far from a place where we would want to rid it entirely from the country, but there is definitely a movement. And I think that's where a lot of, again, I think as Christians we should be, is on the front lines of loving, serving, and changing hearts and minds on this issue and protecting life. But so.
And I'm what's giving me most hope is just the furious reaction of those who are pro-abortion and just the rage and the anger. And I think we're over the right target in that regard. Like we're in the right place if they're responding that way.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful. We'll see what happens. I guess we'll see. But I really think for people who care about life, our work is never done. I mean, there's going to be crisis pregnancies, and we want to be caring for these women and giving them every opportunity to have healthy setups. We need to encourage our men to be real fathers again. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's a good step. I'm encouraged.
Our time is almost up, but I wanted to wait. I waited till the end to throw a tough question at you guys. We agree that abortion kills an innocent human life. What do you think about? Could there be any exceptions to it making it permissible to have an abortion? They talk about rape. They talk about the life of the mother. What are your thoughts on that? Any exceptions to make it acceptable in some cases?
Well, as a Christian, our aim is life. We save life. Life's complicated, how things work, and I think there's a case-by-caseness about things. I think as we look at the only case that I can see where I would entertain exceptions as we mentioned, the life of the mother. I think if you're dealing with incest or rape, those are horrifying things, but it doesn't nullify the worth of that little one. And so there is, I get it, and it's horrifying on the one hand, but that's an innocent child. And while I am all for, you know, the harshest penalties against those who would commit these atrocious acts, yet that child is not guilty of these things and should not pay the penalty for it. If the woman is horrified in keeping the child, give birth, be done, and don't have extra blood on your hand and the extra guilt of having killed this child. So I would not entertain abortions for them. Now, again, as an American citizen, I understand politically you get as much as you can. It's the art of the possible. And since it's so rare anyway, those cases, that I'd be almost like, you know what, that would, if those are your exceptions, for now I'm okay with that, simply because it will save millions of lives. I think the life of the mother, it's complicated. It's very complicated. You have some clear-cut case like an ectopic pregnancy where the child it cannot survive, and the woman's life is in danger, and so it's a heartbreaking thing to do. It's more complicated if, like, the woman has cancer and doing the radiation would kill the child. Then you're talking about, is the life of the mother or the life of the child, and that's where it's like, you know what, that's the family's decision. Got to figure that out, how you want to do it. But even there, it's not an abortion, as it is, you know, the radiation or the treatments would result in that. It's not, you know, so it's complicated in those situations, and that's where I would seek more case by case.
Let me, you know, one of the great things, again, about being a pastor is you come across real life cases. And just to give you two, I won't use the names, of course, but there was a mom who came in who the child was clearly going to die, and that bringing the pregnancy to the end would be very dangerous for her. And they did do proactive measures to make sure that she would be safe. And my counsel to her was, don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. This didn't happen in a clinic at some dark, you know, this is something with your doctor, which the doctor absolutely assured her there was no chance. There was no chance. This is for your protection at this point in time. And you did what I think any mom should do in that situation. So, you know, another situation where a woman came in, and someone I knew, and she had been in a very difficult marriage. And she was pregnant again, and she wasn't sure whether the marriage was going to last. And she asked me if she was considering an abortion. And I just counseled her again and again. I was trying to be very gentle, but saying, you know, trust the Lord in this and see what he does. And she told me later on, she said, if you just gave me the tiniest glimmer of hope, Pastor Rick, like if you just said, well, maybe you got to do what you got to do when it comes to abortion, anything, I was off to the clinic. If you just gave me any little leeway out, but you didn't. And she had the baby, loves this baby, and she brought this baby in and said, Pastor Rick, he's here because of you. As a pastor, a lot of our work is spiritual work, and you don't get to see it, right? You don't get to see, like, with your own eyes. But seeing this baby and holding this baby and saying, and she loves this baby. I mean, this is for me, it was such a tangible reality of life being legitimately rescued and saved. And this child will grow up and hopefully serve the Lord and be this great man someday, you know. So, I think there are very practical implications of what we do. There are exceptions. You counsel people through those. There are moral difficulties, but I think we stand on the truth of the Scripture, and we go with that, right? I don't have the wisdom, but God's Word has the wisdom, and I follow Him and prayerfully trust Him going forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's a great story to end on, and I would just conclude by saying this, that there may be someone watching this who's had an abortion before. Maybe you were the mother. Maybe you were the guy that urged the woman to have the abortion. And I want to encourage you that there is no mistake, there's no sin that we have committed, that when we bring it to Christ cannot be totally forgiven, and that your heart can be totally healed. And you can expect, if you're trusting in Christ, that you'll meet that child one day. All will be forgiven, and that child is safe with Jesus. The cross is the center of it all, and that's why we call our show Crossroads. So thanks for joining us. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Michael, and see you next time.